And we are live for another Mattriarchy. We have some people even watching in the chat. Bianca Fights the Zombies is here. The Metal is here. Matthew Seibel is here. And, of course, Paula and Tonic. Thank you guys for coming. How are y'all doing today? Oh, of course, of course. Last time I cut us all short, especially you guys, because I went on to talk for another 2 hours on somebody else's show. But we're here for a real in-depth conversation until I cut you guys off and invite Jeremy on an hour two. So, no, I'm not going to cut you off. That was a joke. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
You guys can duke it out with Jeremy. So, what are you guys doing to stay busy in the midst of the quarantine?
Oh, goodness, what am I not doing? Let's see. So, I homeschool, so I'm still teaching my kids. And I'm crafty, so my sister-in-law has asked me to make masks. So, I've designed a pattern for masks. And I'm working on fulfilling my Kickstarter rewards for Soulbound 2.
How did that end up going for you? Because I got to be completely honest, I don't remember.
Well, it ended up all right. I did fund. I didn't quite hit 2,000, which I was kind of hoping for, but extenuating circumstances. And yeah, so I'm really pleased. I got like about 10 more backers than I had for the first one. And yeah, so I need to work on one of my digital rewards packages, and I wanted to redo the PDF of Soulbound issue 1 as well, because I did not like the way that one turned out with the freeware PDF converter. So I now have a way to make better PDFs, and everybody who got over, like, hang on, I had to reboot my brain for a second there. Everybody who pledged at $6 and over is getting a fresh new PDF of issue 1.
Sweet. Very cool. And how many issues do you have mapped out for Soulbound?
It's going to be a 10-issue series. I've already done the script for issue 3. That was one of the things I was busy with. And I do want to go back and touch it up a little bit, but it's pretty much in the form that it will be in. And it's like the whole, I think I have it at 34 pages. So that's going to take up the whole comic. For issue 2, I was able to give my artist Mia some room in the comic to do a teaser for her project that she's been working on called Paradox Theorem. And it's going to be really cool. I can't wait to see how that turns out.
Sweet.
And let's see. Yeah, I won't have any extra space on the next one, though. We'll just barely be able to get in a credits page.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, Tonic, you have been saving the world.
Yeah. Slowly. Yeah. So I did it because of my coronavirus. I decided to cut down the turnaround, which, like, I tried to do everything like an experiment. So, see what happens. And so I decided that May 1st, I'd launch for issue number 2, because I can write and draw fast enough, but Kickstarter and Indiegogo can't get me money fast enough. So what I didn't think about, though, was that I just shipped the Kickstarter rewards like the day my next campaign launch because it takes 15 days for the money to clear.
Oh, wow.
And a part of me is like, well, it's locked in, so I don't care. But then, my money side brain goes, yeah, they can alter. It's unprofessional to ship it before it's in your bank because they can technically alter their payments still. They have a little, so you really just shouldn't ship anything. And until that 15 days when Amazon Pay with Kickstarter holds it, but Indiegogo holds it for 15 days for whatever they do. So they hold the money. Anyways, so I didn't fully think about that because Indiegogo, I had not planned when I was going to ship number 2. I was just seeing what I didn't think I'd make $500. So when that Indiegogo and then the Kickstarter, I was like, I was just getting everything together and shipping out Indiegogo. And I was like, man, right when I'm done, I can ship out Kickstarter and be done. And then I was like, oh no, there's 15-day wait. And I'd already really, because of the shutdown and everything, I was full blown to get this issue number 2 funded and start shipping by the end, which I estimated to be June 1st when I thought everything would be done. So this was a little shorter turnaround than I anticipated having, but it was kind of it seemed ideal type of deal. But I would not suggest it to anybody because sure, you can draw and write that comic that fast, but you gotta ship it.
Yeah.
And I do, but here's my experiment since hell I'm here anyways. People and the Kickstarter are getting their comic right now. If they like it, they can immediately go and order issue 2. So there's no delay at all.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, they're waiting to get their comic, while the campaign's going. But there's 30 days. And Kickstarters are getting their comics now. Like a lot have already contacted, I got the comic or whatever. And so that seems to be by the end of, probably by Monday or Tuesday, everything will have arrived for the Kickstarter people. And so I'll kind of...
I'm sorry.
I'll kind of see what the... like my last campaign, the last 2 campaigns both did the same thing. Big surge, plateau like crazy for 15 days, and then a final surge of the last week. And
that's a lot of campaigns have that pattern.
Yeah, it seems to be consistent, and I think that both of my Kickstarter and Indiegogo, they surged more than they did last time. Both of them, my Kickstarter actually started out a little like softer, like at $300 or $350 for the that plateaued until like 20 days into it, and then it surged higher than my Indiegogo. So my surge at the end of the Kickstarter pushed me ahead, even though the surge at the beginning. So the bigger surge on Kickstarter at the end.
Right.
Now it's the opposite. I expected Kickstarter to be soft because I'm shipping out their comics as we speak. And so I was like, oh, well, that'll be fine though. I'll get that surge maybe during the plateau when they all are getting them. And it, I'll feel a little better during the plateau because the plateau is totally mental. It means nothing. It's right. But you feel like, oh, it's over. Oh, well, I'm done. I'm quit. I'll never see issue number 3 now. And so, I thought that'd be a good deal. But ended up, I guess they don't care because I reached 700 and Kickstarter in the first few days. But Indiegogo, Indiegogo was still ahead of its Indiegogo last time, but it's been trailing behind Kickstarter. But I do know a lot of people who backed me on Indiegogo backed me on Kickstarter this time. So it's probably that more than anything. And now they're almost even. I think 740 and 714 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they caught up. For a while, Indiegogo is lagging. But anyway, that's numbers and boring stuff. But
no, I think that's actually really interesting. The markets, because there's people that are only shop on Indiegogo, people that only shop on Kickstarter, people that they cheat. They're promiscuous with their crowdfunding spending.
And you know, I see some people that are choosing one, you know, and there's a lot of, I don't know. I don't believe much of any of the stuff people say about either one. Because for me, it ended up hashing out the same. You know, there's conspiracy theories and stuff, but they're both the same, regardless when it shakes down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying a little bit here for one the other, but their timing, I would say Kickstarter is easier to start a campaign than Indiegogo. Indiegogo, it's very, you know, a little bit more complicated with your images and your videos and all that, which I skipped a video this time. It's a little bit more complicated. And whereas Kickstarter is really easy. You just put it all in your description because they're like your items don't have pictures and all these types of things. So it makes it a little simpler. But on Kickstarter, you get traffic just driving through. I get almost no traffic on Indiegogo, just passerby. If someone went to Indiegogo, I sent them there. Personally, myself, I drove them up to the door and let them out. But on Kickstarter,
I
gave him a little kick.
yeah. All my Indiegogo is almost all people I've met and sold the comic to directly. Kickstarter, these are all new people to me. Never met them before. They don't know I exist on Twitter. They're just shopping on Kickstarter. And so there's a lot to say about Kickstarter. And Indiegogo, you know, I'm sure both have their kind of biases. I fall in between, so the biases do not work or hurt me. You know, no, they don't care. They just leave me the hell alone. But, you know, for Indiegogo, for certain people, yeah, they cater to them hard. But not me. They don't care. But Kickstarter the same way. They ignore me. So for me, it becomes totally different things of what I care about.
Well, I mean, as a shopper, I prefer Indiegogo because I like the money coming out of my bank right away.
Right.
And sorry, I didn't realize my phone was on. But yeah, I prefer having the money come out right away. That way I don't have to keep track of it long term. Because I don't actually manage my money. My wife does.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, by the way, $30 is going to be coming out of the bank in 6 weeks. She looks at me like I'm crazy. Like, why would you do this?
And you know, the one on the back end, a lot of the things that are said about Indiegogo are completely false and actually true about Kickstarter. For instance, Kickstarter, there's a lot more security. Indiegogo's been trying to implement that security, but so far they lag way behind. So as a customer, you are dramatically safer at Kickstarter than you are at Indiegogo, especially with indie comics, which some have, you know, bad reputations of using information. And whereas Kickstarter, it's hard to get it. Even when you're trying to ship comics to people, you know, it takes some, you got to ask them, and then they send it the whole backer reports or whatever.
Right.
I forget what it's called, but yeah. So
I need to send out my surveys.
Yeah. And, you know, I got all my surveys back except for one. Maybe except for one, or maybe I actually, no, I did get it. So I had 2 out, and then right as I was shipping, right before I was shipping, the last few came in, and then I had 1 straggler, and I was boxing things out, about to drive off to the post office, and all of a sudden, boop, it popped up on my phone. So that was my biggest worry. You know, you think I made a bunch of money, and which I guess it takes their money anyways. It's just whether you get to ship the comic to them or not. But no, that was no problem. That ended up being okay. And now that would be the one thing as a shopper, I don't like that I have to answer a survey and remember it. That's
that's also true. The most recent thing I backed on Kickstarter that came up with was because most of the stuff I've got on Kickstarter was digital, so the survey does not matter as much.
Yeah.
But with I picked up Common America, and I didn't have a chance to forget to fill up my survey because like every day Tim Lim was in my timeline reminding me to do it. So
that's the way to go.
Just that little Chinaman just guilt tripping me into filling out my Kickstarter survey.
Yeah. Mine went through real fast. I didn't really have much time because I don't think I sent out my surveys and all but 2 came back, and I was like, well, I'll just wait for those dudes, and they came through. So I was like, okay. I really thought it was going to be much more complicated, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I'm going to have only half send it in and it'd be a freaking mess because I'm trying to get these things out before I launch my second campaign right after that.
I wonder if because that your surveys would have gone out after Tim made such a huge giant stink about it across Twitter. So I wonder if there wasn't.
No, he made me paranoid. I was thinking, I was like, man, it must be pretty rough to get these people to answer damn questions. But no, it wasn't bad at all.
Maybe he just primed everybody, and they're like, "Oh, I want to do a survey."
They're like, "I don't want Tonic Mole coming after me like Tim Lim did."
We should all hire him. He can be like the survey enforcer.
Yeah, that's right. Give him a badge.
So, well, and actually, that's an interesting little segue. We'll go ahead and take there, because one of the things I want to talk about today is kind of building networks, right? And by that I'm talking about networks of fans, customers, and fellow creators. How do we? Because all of us guys who do indie comics, right? It's basically comes down to a dude or a pair of dudes, or ladies, whatever, in a basement somewhere, hammering, out a dream, right? But nobody shows up at your door and says, "Please, sir, may I have some comics?" Right?
Right.
God, wouldn't that be wonderful? But
the indie invisibility problem is huge.
It's enormous, right? And there's a lot of competition in the market for any, especially because one of the great things about living in the modern era that we have is that we have lowered the bar for entry into comics and graphic media is so much lower than it used to be, right? Because you don't have to have a giant print runs. There's print on demand. There's web comics. You can, of course, even Staples can produce quality product if you're willing to, pay out the nose for it. But I mean, with all of that, there's Amazon stuff. But because the barrier of entry is low, that means that there's more competition.
Yeah. Well, and there's a little bit because it is interesting because hold on. I have all my stuff handy because I never usually do.
The metal's cracking me up tonight, man. Maybe not your door.
Well, his door's got cat girls.
Yeah.
I did this a long time ago. 2003. Well, it don't feel like a long time ago, but it was. So I did this little comic book back in the day, and I photocopied it at a public library. It was super expensive to do per issue, but I printed out, I don't know, 100 maybe, and I photocopied them and I sold them here and there. It did not do it was not successful, but that was the only way to do it because there was only offset print press, which the minimum run back then was 3,000 at most places I saw, and it was $2 or more an issue, which it was just unfeasible and impossible to do. So the biggest evolution was digital printing, where you could do one. It wouldn't be that. It's not even that expensive to do just one if you wanted one, but you can do print runs of 200 or 300, and for if you can get to 300 to 500 or so, you can get under $2 a piece.
Yep.
And so
especially
that was
for black and white.
Yeah, and that was a huge explosion. But with networking, modern networking changed it even more. So not only did the entry level kind of lower for who could actually print a comic because of digital printing, but now you have something that's never been seen before, and it's a writer getting into what would be underground small print press comics, which a lot of people I feel don't notice how bizarre that is, because that's not a thing that happened before. You either had a best friend who lived across the street that could draw, or more often than not, because that was rare. That just because I think of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, which Kevin Eastman could have drew it himself. I don't know what that is. I don't know, timing or something. But those two, or you just drew it yourself and wrote it yourself. Like the vast majority of these small print press guys. But now, because, you know, with networking and whatnot, a writer can find an artist and pay them. It's expensive, but it's possible. It's a thing they can do. And then Kickstarter makes that Kickstarter and Indiegogo makes it actually feasible. So it's a very interesting evolution to where we've never had teams working on comics of small print press comics before. So yeah, that bar was lowered, and then it was, you know, turned sideways. You know, and completely different genre of people could enter the small press. So that's interesting. Though the competition wise, we have Atari, when Atari came out, and anybody could make a game on Atari. And so you didn't know which one was, like, you could buy 50 games and they might not be operational. And, you know, it makes marketing that much harder because you really have to stand out in a very big sea. So, I mean, it's kind of competition, but it's different because it's not like there's a increase in the amount of good comic, particularly. Just certainly the quantity, though, is just a wave, and you know they're hard to dig through. But
yeah, it's really easy to get lost as an indie creator. So that's one of the things that my new project is supposed to be helping to fix with Indigen.xyz. And it's a very small beginning of a very large searchable database of indie entertainment. I want to get more gamers on there. I want to do more indie games. I'm not really active in those spheres, so I want to see what I can do there. But I'm already reaching out to several authors in sci-fi and fantasy, and also some in comics as well. So you're going to be able to go to the site and just type in what medium you want to see, whether it's comics or books or whatever else I can get in there, what genre you like. And I'm working on if you loved tags. So if you type in IYL and whatever big media thing like IYL Star Wars, then I would love to have creators pop up in the search that have actually done something in the vein of Star Wars. And it just takes stuffing each listing with tags. So, I mean, I could do this by just searching out all the indie creators and just listing them and linking to their sites. I wouldn't need necessarily their permission to do it. But in order to get the right tags on everything, it's really going to help me out if more people apply.
Yeah. And so I have not. I looked at it real briefly last time you were on. I mean, after you were on, because I was interested in the concept, but I didn't go very far into that. Is it? I mean, like, what kind of functionality do you have on the site right now?
Pretty much all I need is more booths. So right now it's functioning. It like there's a drop down for more search terms. So you got the medium, the maturity rating. Like if you only want to be searching like rated G stuff for your kids, then only G stuff will pop up. Or if you're not searching for kids stuff, then there's rated G, rated mature, rated teen, rated YA, just so that you can estimate what age group that you're going for. And I've also got an option for location. So if you want to support your local creators, then you can find out what state they're in. I'm not going to like post full addresses.
Right. No, I think
it's for a comic shop. Now I want to put comic shops on here, and this is really important because I've got one so far. Comic shops, the single biggest predictor if a indie comic will sell in their shop is local talent. If it's local talent, then they will consider stocking your comic. They will seriously consider it. If it looks good, they'll stock it. They'll, tell people, hey, this is the local guy or local girl or whoever. And so if you have your state on your comic, or if you're searching through Indigen.xyz, you can search for your state and come up with the comic and local retailers. And you will have, eventually, once I get all these guys in here, you will have a list of comic shops to pitch your comic to. And if a comic shop wants more local comics in their shop, they can search by state too, and they can find you. Now, I wasn't going to do anything for location, but a lot of people, they kind of want to be anonymous in comic creation. It's things are contentious right now. Okay, right. I get it. So it's optional on the application. You don't have to put your state. But if you want to do that, I would recommend it. And also, you don't have to put like your actual name. You can put your pen name or you're doing business as or whatever. But I'm just asking for stuff on the application that I need to fill out a really good listing that when you scroll over it, it'll show up your blurb, what you're all about. You'll have a nice big picture that's attractive and attracts people. The whole idea is like it's an online comic convention or really pop culture convention, because anytime anyone's looking for any kind of entertainment, they might not necessarily be looking specifically for a comic, but they might come across yours. I think that the more media that I have on here, the more popular it'll get, and it'll just snowball into something bigger.
Yeah, I am. While you're talking about it, I was scooping over the slight another thing. I'm going to go ahead and actually do a share screen, and make sure, because I think it is actually got some interesting. I think your layout's fun. Oh, hey, Neo Star got here, so I had missed that before. Come on, where to go?
So I have a little bit on here right now. So I don't have a lot of booths, but if you click down, I've got books, comics, local retailers, and the website is Indigen itself.
Yeah. And
you can sort it by genre, and
hey,
there's even star ratings on here too, which not everything has a star rating yet. But for now, I'm kind of turning off comments. I might put up the comments. I might not. I don't know. Comments turn into a dumpster fire.
They do very quickly, because like people, I think there's always a temptation for somebody, if they've got beef, to go ahead and make an excuse about it, to talk about it. I think that's it's a shame, but it does happen.
Yeah, but I think that this is something that's a good front for, it's facing out into the larger audience, not just inward to the in group and, this guy and this guy and this guy, and they know this other guy, and maybe you'll like his comic, and you've got to like negotiate all this social stuff currently in the underground of the indie comics.
Right.
And normal people will not do that. I'm sorry. We are not normal. But most people, they just want to go browsing on Amazon or walk through a Comic Con. They just want to go, hey, look, shiny, and pick it up. They don't want to like go through somebody's genealogy or whatever it is that we're proving people by. We don't need that.
I absolutely agree.
We need a little display so that it can look shiny for the people it needs to look shiny for.
Yeah.
No, and I found that I think the importance of Hyperbole and stuff like that in indie comics has been really overstated. Like they see these like
Wait, let's break this down for a second because it made me chuckle. The importance of hyperbole in comics has been overstated.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know, there's the big what would you call it? Culture war.
Yeah.
So there's the big culture war, and everybody swears that it's working and selling a lot of comics. And because they assume the reason anybody buys a comic is based on which side of this culture war you're on.
Mm-hmm.
And
like 90% of the country doesn't even realize it's going on.
They have no idea. And I'm noticing that most people buying comic books don't even know what's going on, and they can be part of, they're not even fully aware when they're part of one of these things that they don't understand it, or they just don't really think about it.
Yeah. It's not such a big selling point for people.
No.
They want to be entertained.
I think there's the difference is because it is a big selling point for some people. You hear people talk about, I've bought these books that I can't afford because I believe in the cause, and you hear a lot of that these days, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that are out there with their GoFundMes that are like, I need to pay rent because I spent all my money on X book, and I'm like, dude, but I think one of the things we have there is so there are enough people that have bought into the narrative, and I'm not going to say that the narrative is completely false at its core. I think there are cultural issues that are at play there, but not to have that conversation right now.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest problem is that that is a short-term strategy.
It is because you're
exactly the same. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, because you're creating a club or a bubble, and everybody inside it knows about the culture war. They know who they're pitted against. They know what's going on. And then you sell back and forth to all the people inside there, and then everyone outside the bubble either does not know you exist or they think you're a complete weirdo. And why can't you just go to the store and buy a comic book?
Right. Well, and one of the things is like, and part of that has to do with I think combination of ignorant people and ill-meaning people that have framed what culture war is, right? What it is. So if the culture war is a thing, and that there is a battle between value structures that are taking place in the Western world, right?
Well,
the way that's
all cultures are at war constantly.
Well, but, yeah, I think there's I'm just framing it up.
Okay.
But if such a thing exists, and then the way you win a culture war is by demonstrating the qualities of a culture, not by denigrating the qualities of another culture. You have to show that your cultural paradigm is best. Now, if we're making entertainment, if we're making fiction, if we're telling stories, if we're making music, if we're doing art, then all that matters is not the rhetoric, it's the product. Yeah. So you can tell exactly what products sell, and that's the gauge of what is how well it's telling the culture along, right? So between what's being produced versus what's being sold, then that's what the market is generating. And as a fairly right-wing guy, the market's right.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's part of it.
The market's right.
There's a complexity because on one hand, do we believe in capitalism or not? Evidently, no. Has no faith in it whatsoever because we feel we have to force it. Yet, as we watch, society generally takes care of itself. It takes longer. And what it is, it's more of impatience. One thing swings one way and we can't fix it fast enough. So we take the little campfire and we throw gasoline on it and make an inferno and go, look what you did. And it's like, you just started an inferno. That thing would have went out by itself if you left it alone. But, and for me, the problem is the war. And in a way the whole point was that there was propaganda that was not the same as art or expression. It was stamped out in a boardroom to pander to the masses, just like a Fast and Furious movie. You know, nobody goes, "Oh, Fast and Furious. That really touched me emotionally." No, it's the explosions and the colors and everything is designed just to make you go, "I likes it. That's fun." And that was modern comic books. So arguably, almost the history of Marvel DC has never been super artistic in a deep way. I mean, it's always been buy Hostess cupcakes, but they
I would disagree with that, but we'll move it for long.
We'll let that be. But
we'll leave it be for now.
But you know, and so the complaint was a culture war, and in mine it still is, except for I don't care, but I'm on this side of the war shooting the gun. The problem was the war in the first place, that it's comic books. Our industry is dead. Why are we now making it a battle zone? It's not going to drag more people into this thing. They didn't want to be here in the first place, evidently. And the fact that, you know, I talked to a lot of fans and that are passionate about this, and they said, well, you know, to be honest, I haven't bought a comic outside since the late 90s. And I'm like, well, hold on. Y'all started this giant mess of a war and you haven't bought a comic in over 20 years? Then why do you care what DC and Marvel is doing if you haven't cared for 20 years to pick up one of their comics? Hence why I don't really care. I haven't picked up one of their comics in 20 years either.
See, and actually, I have a very opposite story, because like I was a regular going down to the co-op Saturday mornings, flipping through the turntable back in 2005 when my babies were little. My oldest one was big enough to go out with me, and so he'd go out Saturday mornings and we'd go get DC comics off the shelf and pick which ones we want and put the other ones back. And that was a ritual for us.
Yeah.
And because I was a diehard, right? And I was making comics, doing the web comic thing back then and everything. So like when they ushered in the new 52 and just like slashed my continuity, I was like, you guys are dead to me.
Right.
I was emotionally hurt by it, but I was like, that's fine. That's more time. I can save my money and I can spend my time making my universe, which is better than yours because you're stupid.
Right. And you know,
it quit being fun. It was great as long as it was fun, and then it quit being fun. And this is at the heart of it. Entertainment needs to be fun. And that's something that's not anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think that some people like me who are very serious about the culture war aspect of it, because I think that when it comes down to cultures, it's really a study of what is truth. And so I think that matters. And not that one culture specifically, like not one world culture necessarily, has a monopoly on truth, but a culture doesn't do its job if it's not pushing people to look for truth, right? And to seek for truth. And otherwise that culture doesn't serve humanity, right? So I think that's really important. Anyway, for some people like me who are very serious about the philosophical ideas and the politics ideas and the big Oxford kind of ideas, we sometimes forget that it needs to be fun, right? And Lord of the Rings is an excellent example of a massive cultural work that's just this sheet anchor of Western society, but it's also so much fun. and we need to make sure we're maintaining that if we're going to have it.
Well, the truth thing is that's more like I think the truth aspect is less of a culture war, because I think the culture war, for me, a lot of it is always wrong. It's kind of evil begets evil. The two sides get worse the more they fight. They started only 2 feet apart, and the more they fight, the further that distance in between is.
Well, but I don't agree with that premise. I don't think they started 2 feet apart, because I think the sides as we see them today are not really the sides, right? Because the true debate right, is between truth and non-truth, right? And so there are people that say, "Oh, I'm on the side of truth," and then they're lie. They just everything they do is a lie. And then these people say, "I'm on the side of truth," and everything they do is a lie. So
I don't
obviously,
think
the
truth
two sides
was
we have
ever.
are not really what's going on.
I think you're overly optimistic that truth was ever invited into this war at any given point.
Oh, I think it's an analog. I don't think it was necessarily. That's what I'm saying is I don't think it was. I don't think that's part of the universe. That's not
Right.
People.
Yeah.
People don't
Truth
get to
says-
decide whether it's at the table. We just get to decide if we get to listen
Right.
to it talk.
And
Well, if there's no truth, then there's no reality.
right, and I think that is, I think there's a culture war that almost covers up any possibility of truth, because as just getting back to like a creator, artist, writer, and all these things, you should never, like, a writer should never assume a truth when they're writing. For instance, I started this story and I had just a very basic premise of what was going to happen. And as I wrote it, my brain goes, well, that's not quite right if you think about it, because the more I write, the more I'm dissecting these characters and thinking about it more thoroughly. So I have my outline. Well, as I wrote it, it just completely rewrote itself because my assumptions to what this story would be were wrong, because the characters misbehaved to how I wanted them to, because it was illogical how they were behaving. And an example I love is the friend-zoned character. So, and you see in movies the friend-zoned character, and generally the girl kind of, like, if it's a dude that's being friend-zoned and he's kind of a nerdy guy, and then there's the girl who friend-zoned him, and she just needs to give in and like him, right? And in that story, he's the good guy and she's not inherently the bad guy. Sometimes she is, but she just don't know what's good for her. And I was dissecting that story and I was like, no, that's not true at all. There's never a situation in which the guy who's stalking a girl is the good guy. And so I was trying to write a similar, just a little short story and about that. But I went into it thinking, hey, you know that movie 8 Days a Week, which is about a friend zone guy and he's trying to win her over with a boombox or something like that. I don't know why sometimes I just write stories on my phone that will never be anything. But so I started writing it and it just dissolved in my hands like cotton candy in water. Whoop, 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 it's gone. Because I couldn't justify why this guy wasn't not an evil, not bad guy, but why he wasn't just wrong. Why the way he was seeing things was wrong. So as I had him narrating in his head, it instantly, the story just shifted totally. I gave up on it because it was unwritable, but that exercise is the truth of it, that I think it's what is causing why comics inherently, especially mainstream comics, so often feel contrived and untrue, is because they didn't say, okay, what if I just have this basic idea and then explore that idea and let it dissect itself for truth, because truth is very hard to find. It's very hard to get, because I think we inherently we're lying to ourselves just to begin with in a daily basis. We're on a rock sticking out the side of it, spinning around a fusion reactor, and we're like, oh, the sun or whatever. We have to lie to ourselves constantly just to stay sane. So then you zero it down to writing a story. We're so prone to say, well, I wanted this person to be the hero and I want these things to happen. So I think that writers in mainstream comics, there was certainly a culture war, but it was more of a economic one. So you had back in the 90s where you had guys and gals and stuff in their teens and 20s who just graduated high school, maybe they didn't, writing comics and stuff. Now these people are in their late 20s, 30s, and they graduated college, and they had a friend who already worked at Marvel or DC who also graduated that college. These are college educated, and that's why their stories are coming out very Like, you can't tell a writer apart in mainstream comics at this point. They're following this exact ABC.
Yeah.
And the problem that ABC removes any chance of accidental truth coming out. And so you get this very pandery kind of gross stuff.
Well, and I think a lot of that actually, I wouldn't say it started today. I actually think some of that started, at least in DC, started in the early 2000s, hardcore. Because he had at DC there was young kids who were coming in, but there was also a lot of old guard folks. You got, Chuck Dixon. You had friggin' Alan Grant. You had Denny O'Neil. Still, these guys that came up from basically pulp literature, right?
Yeah.
They're those old roots of comics and who had that kind of going on. You have James Robinson, Starman came out of that whole period, and he was one of those young guys who was just kind of came out of nowhere and was just doing the thing. But he had such a love for those pulpy style stories that it just there was so much of that was just exuding air there. But then somebody decided, I really liked Barry Allen stories when I was a kid, so let's make him undead.
Right.
I really liked Hal Jordan stories, so let's make him undead. And
are you sure they really liked them?
Yeah,
maybe
really,
it's
really.
like, I really hated this guy. Let's make him undead.
And there is a part of the problem with the 90s that and I think this is where it goes. The more you look at it, the more you see that this is a multi-forked problem that kind of annihilated comics with. Where do you go after the 90s? Where, especially with DC Marvel, you had everything happen. Okay, the death of Superman. You can't do that again. That was already done.
It turned into complete gimmicks. Everything was a gimmick instead of
and I think
written as a story. They had to write it as gimmicks, and they had to slap a bunch of different covers on it, and everything was just they got away from story.
And I think that's really kind of what I'm getting at, though, is like Batman's back is broken, he came back, Superman was dead and he came back, and you can kind of expect that. I know Tim's been on the show before, and he said that's when he noped out of Western comics. When Superman wasn't dead anymore, they're like, they don't care about the story. Personally, I found him coming back to life, the whole story in that, fairly compelling and interesting, because he was him and his dad in the other underworld, and I thought it was pretty cool, right? There was something mythic about it, kind of a thing. But so I thought that was kind of neat. And you got a sticker, you got Steel and Superboy to spin out from that, and their stories I thought were really interesting and compelling. So I thought it was a kind of a cool take on it myself. But I can understand somebody being like, well, the stakes don't matter. But the thing about it is with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, those guys are tent poles, and I can see that being a thing where maybe you don't touch those, but when you've had 20 years of successful Wally West stories, and then you just be like, oh, we're going to ignore those now and go back to telling Barry Allen stories, that's when that nothing matters to me. I mean,
and for me, I actually dipped out a little after Azrael was taken back down by Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne returned as Batman. Not because I didn't want Bruce Wayne back as Batman. I, of course, did. It's that, what next? I mean, that's jumping the shark. It's in TV shows and movies, jumping the shark. Just jumping the shark isn't always wrong. It's just that 80 years is a long time to tell one story. And so when Batman, Bruce Wayne came back, you look at the movies, the cartoons, they always end with Bane. The Dark Knight trilogy ends with Bane, because you'll never convince readers that era from 1986 to the breaking of the Bat isn't Batman's story. You can reboot him and change things and try to reignite what happens to Batman. No, you can't. It's over. They did that. And so what they're really, both Marvel and DC are struggling with, is that they told their stories. It's over. You can't, there's just nothing more you could squeeze out of these characters.
Well, I think there is, I will take issue with the one thing, and that's that the whole post-crisis Batman is a story of Batman.
Right.
Before that, most of it was not a story about Batman. It was like a Sherlock Holmes story where it wasn't about Holmes, it was about the mysteries. It was about the cases. And if they told Batman stories that were just about the cases, and he had as much impact as the Gil Grissom character in CSI had. I don't know if you've watched CSI back in the early 2000s or not.
A little bit.
But the main character was Gil Grissom. He was the head of the criminal scientists, and he had like 7 episodes that were personal, his stories, and most of them were just him leading the investigative team to solve crimes.
Yeah.
If Batman was just a detective, and if we didn't have to care about his personal problems, we were just in there for the detective stories. You could tell detective stories just like Agatha Christie did with Poirot for 50 years, and nobody would get tired of them because it's not about Batman's arc; it's about each of those detective stories.
I think
everything's got to be a personal story.
I think it's the monthly problem that. Because, I mean, if you look at comic book sales, they nosedive and bottom out until something super exciting happens. And then all of a sudden there's this surge. But admittedly, I mean, I think for DC, if they wanted to salvage this, the biggest problem is probably like the movies. They might not be able to pull off a shared universe as well anymore. Because, jumping the shark and stuff like that. But I mean, you look, every time Frank Miller or Sean Gordon Murphy released their Batman, because it has nothing to do with the main canon. And both of theirs is event also, you know? I mean, every comic Frank Miller or Sean Gordon Murphy, something big happens. But it's this condensed thing. You don't need to know the massive history or what retcons count or which don't. They're just these kind of movie. I was reading The White Knight a few days ago, and it felt like a movie adaptation, you know, to where everything's boiled down. You only need to read that. And now, for DC Comics in their business, that doesn't work. They can't only release one comic of Batman by an extraordinary writer artist. They need this flood because there's advertising revenue. But it feels like they painted themselves into a business corner is what it is. They are so big, and it's hard to backtrack because, you know, I think that New 52 wasn't a terrible idea. They'd ran out of stories to tell. They every time they don't do a big event where everybody dies, their readership falls off. And so they do one of those, and it kind of started and it become an addiction, and then they couldn't just stop. I thought New 52 was a great in theory, but then they didn't do it. They chickened out. New 52 like half retconned things. It's like, no, they should have started from the very beginning, which they'd never done, you know. They say that post-crisis is its own thing, but Batman already had like 2 Robins by that point.
Yeah.
You know, Nightwing had just left and Jason Todd came on right away.
Yeah, and part of the thing with that, I mean, Batman was that way, but a lot of the things were too. There was pieces from the old continuity because it was a single Earth. That was the thing that.
And you know, New 52 made a lot of mistakes that probably couldn't be.
Well, and I mean, I think one of the things I think is the biggest thing the New 52 did was that they tried combining in the Wildstorm universe, which the philosophical underpinnings of the Wildstorm universe don't match the DC universe at all. It's different mythologies. It was literally like, okay, so we're going to tell the Marvel universe, but the background of the Marvel universe is Lord of the Rings.
Right. But they owned it, so why not?
So Captain America is an elf.
Right.
What? Oh man. Anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems it had to have stemmed from just trying to keep the same few characters going on the same stories punctuated by big events for so long.
Yeah, and that's actually
this is a like if Batman had happened in real time, if his life had been on the real timeline, he'd be old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and I mean, I
It's
actually
not-
had a with
it's
the
not possible.
yeah. Well, I agree. I think actually one of the things that's interesting is I think I had this theory back in the late 90s that if you were to take the Golden Age Batman stories that weren't tied to the Golden Age and the Silver Age Batman stories that weren't tied to that time period, and you were to map it out, I bet I saw and with the Legend of the Dark Knight and everything, I would bet that a person who was studious could map out a day by day for the 15 years of Batman's career. If Batman started his career at 25 or at 23 and now he's 41, I'll bet you can have a day by day reckoning by putting all of these things together and then just punctuate it.
And
for the
I
thousand,
don't know if he could have lived to 41 doing all that, man.
well, I mean, his best friend is a space alien. I'll give him this. But I mean that's one of the things too. But you're talking about one of the things though, Tonic, that I think your analysis is a little off as far as the market goes. Obviously we're seeing those kind of sales numbers, but I think part of that has to do because the way comics are being done has chased off their market. And I think Matthew Seibel in the chat has really pointed to something. So I stopped reading Marvel and Image around 2005 because of lack of funds. I focused on manga, mainly from the library. Manga, which has contained stories, even if they are really, really long, they're contained. They're within their own thing. They have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Kind of ideas. And so they're not. And then when somebody finishes a story, they just go on and tell the next story, right? Even if it's connected. And so we're not dealing with all the alternate continuities. You're not dealing with all the extra timelines. You go back and you read One Punch Man, pick up the back issues of the library and then get the new ones at the newsstand at the Barnes and Noble. And you know what it's about. You don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel,
Right.
And that's something. And I think that reinventing the wheel is what is doing more harm to modern Western comics than the monthly aspect of it, because people are still buying Shonen Jump by the month.
And I don't even know, because the 90s bubble burst, and there has been growth ever since then. It hasn't been enough growth for the industry to be secure in any way. But you see the sales slowly increase over this long time, and but kind of plateauing, and now it's kind of turbulent. I don't think the wheel's ever been invented, because there's never a TV show. The longest running TV show is nowhere close to as long as a comic book's run. There's no show that I know of that started in 1986 that is still running without pause or change. And let alone when you look at Marvel, it's longer. They claim the 60s counts. And so, it's this, that's unheard of. The X-Files was canceled. They just said, okay, we're done. We ran out of stories, cancel it. You can't cancel Batman. He has to go forever. And so, it's kind of, they're beating a dead horse and
fighting over the pieces.
Yeah, and tearing the pieces apart.
And I think that's actually a big factor, is just the idea that how much story is there being told, and are people, and that's one thing I talked about with Batman. If Batman was just a situation where it's about the detecting, it's about the individual cases, you're never going to find an end of cases, because even if you end up repeating something or retelling it, it's still how many different versions of the Murder on the Orient Express have been done, right? But every one of them has something to offer, right? How many times have we seen Romeo and Juliet performed, right? Dozens. And most of them have something to offer. But
I don't know. It's kind of a downer, though. They both die.
Well, yes.
That's
Except in the one with the garden nose.
Yeah, but that's the point, Jeremy. The whole point is that they die. You don't have the story, because the point of Romeo
is joke I am making.
I know. But this is the thing. I always point this out, because for me, when I was a child, when I was a young teen, and they made me read this in school, and I didn't get it. I couldn't stand it. I hated the story. I hated the leads. I couldn't understand why they're making us read this thing. And then I saw the version with Leo DiCaprio and what's her bucket and Boz Luhrmann.
Claire Danes.
Claire Danes, thank you. Boz Luhrmann's. And I watched it and I realized the entire point of Romeo and Juliet is that kids are stupid and that hate kills. And then suddenly the whole thing was beautiful.
I really liked Claire Danes' angel costume.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I liked
that
that
was
production.
It's sort of a beautiful, like there are parts of that movie that are just beautiful.
Mhm.
I didn't like it overall, but there's a lot of beauty to it.
I still like it. I think I will agree that like it's because of the stylization, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But the fact that it like opened up my brain to understand more of like Shakespeare's like language palette, not in terms of like, I mean, I could understand reading Shakespeare. That wasn't what I mean, but I mean as far as like it's like that movie was a Rosetta Stone for me in terms of understanding kind of how he layered themes. And so like the other books other plays of his that I'd read, Much About Nothing and A Comedy of Errors and Macbeth and that kind of stuff that I understood on one level. Suddenly I was able to say, oh, if this is how he was telling this tragedy, how does that apply to his other things? And it was eye-opening to understanding more of how he layered things. So
did you see the Joss Whedon version of Much Ado About Nothing?
I did. It's maybe the best Joss Whedon picture ever.
It's so good. You know, and
It's
like
also,
it was just, sorry, you go ahead.
It's also really funny because Whedon, I read some interviews with him about it, and he just goes on about how the whole play is a feminist power piece, and
my god!
And I think it's hilarious because the point of the play is actually that men need women to be noble, and women need men to be honorable, and like the two of them together, it's about complementarianism. It's all about complementarianism and how we're better. Each of us, the sexes, are better humans because we have the other to bounce these needs off of, it's the anti in terms of third wave feminism. It's the anti of everything.
He's a lot better storyteller than he is a philosopher. I'll just say that.
He would have to be.
I would think that, I mean, kind of like that's a great example of, so you can do Romeo and Juliet a million times in a million different ways, and it's always entertaining. But we didn't say a sequel to Romeo and Juliet. We said that story. Mm-hmm. And so comics is this inherently different thing. I would buy the living crap out of a remake of Nightfall. New artist, new writer, but refined, knowing what we know now about storytelling, to where it doesn't begin in the middle of a story and then keep going. You have this finality to it, this beginning and end, and it's a big thing with high production values and written not to sell 20-page comics every month, but as this big, I would be interested in that.
That's really interesting you bring that up, because Denny's novelization of Nightfall is, I don't know if you've read it, it's pristine.
Yeah, and see,
it's a great novel.
But see, they can't do that currently. Like, they wrote Romeo and Juliet's of Batman and all these characters. Now they're trying to write the sequel,
but they're dead.
Right, but they're dead. It's really hard.
Yeah, first you got to make them undead.
Right.
So vampires, right?
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, I bet that exists somewhere. But and so
I mean, we got Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
I've got that stuck in my head now. the zombie version.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness.
That's going to be his new obsession. He'll be tweeting about, I'm writing the sequel to Romeo and Juliet.
Oh my God.
So I think that's why I like indie comics, not because I hate mainstream comics. It's because I love Batman and I love those characters. But I don't think outside of a single artist's unique vision of Batman, like Sean Gordon Murphy or Frank Miller or whatever, I don't think there's anything really interesting to tell as a soap opera. Comics are inherently soap opera. So I think the soap opera is bad, but I don't think it was intentional. I think there's just no way to squeeze that out. So I looked to indie because that's the only place to get new characters, a fresh start, to a universe, and you pick up issue 1 and you learn about it. You just can't beat that fresh start and going. And I think that's why the superhero movies destroy the comics with the fans. The MCU is just moving through those stories, retelling the same story but with a big production value, and it's a movie. But when we see comics that do that same idea, where they take the idea, boil it down, and make it in a more condensed, coherent fashion, they sell they do great. And that's Sean Gordon Murphy. As I was reading it, he ignores canon. It's his own Batman that's unrelated. And it's really good. Like, it's interesting how he twists things. The Joker isn't a chemical bath guy or nothing like that. All that's thrown out. Yeah. And there's 2 Harley Quinns and all this stuff, but it's very interesting. But when I tried to read the monthly, I read Tom King's for a little bit, and
I'm sorry.
I know. Well, here's my weird deal. I thought Scott Snyder's was really boring.
Okay.
For me, he was like, okay, those great stories you read already. Ignore all those. I'm going to retell them differently. And it always, for me, it felt overly complicated. Kind of like he's like, wait, Dick Grayson, there's a thing in his tooth, he's Italian. And I'm like, oh, it's interesting. But as I read, like, Batman's suit came apart in different things, and kind of like the origin, when he retold the origin of Batman. Frank Miller did that. I feel that's definitive. And so when he goes, yeah, but there was a hologram thing that his dad had. I'm like, a hologram? What the hell is this, Blade Runner? When, you have when you have something so definitive and perfect as Frank Miller's Year One, and then you go, yeah, I'm going to add sci-fi to it. Well, no, you didn't make it better. Just leave that alone and say, oh, you remember that happened. We're going to move on from there.
And I think one of the things that we've done in our universe to try to stave off that kind of thing, of course, it's only a small groups of people that are making it, so we don't have the editorial board to answer to, right?
Yeah.
But with Ideal Comics, when we set it up originally back in 2005, we said, okay, we're going to make this thing reboot proof because we are our fixed timeline, right?
Yeah.
We know when things happen. It's set in stone. You don't get to change it. Everybody dies. There are characters, except for the immortal ones, because there's a few of those. They grow old and die. They have children. They pass on legacy. You have all that kind of stuff. Just like Roy Thomas did with the All-Star Squadron, like James Robinson did with Starman. Everybody gets old and everybody dies. Everybody has kids. Well, not everybody has kids, but I mean, it's
the legacy gets passed
by
on,
putting mortality into it.
Yeah, the legacy gets passed on to other generations.
Exactly.
Which you could do, I guess. The Batman. It's like, I didn't really get into Snyder's Batman, so I can't render a good judgment. I read enough of King to I read especially Batman 50 and just threw it at the wall. And I was like, okay, I don't like this at all. It's also I also read his Omega Man and it was not good. There've been a few things like that of King's that I've kind of got to the point where I'm just like, we're done. Yeah. We need to see other people.
I have a very similar reaction to Bendis's writing. So
sure. But there are now and again you still get good Batman things, or Frank Miller did. Obviously The Dark Knight is great. Year One is great. But then the Batman the Animated Series was great. Batman Beyond was great. There are stories that get told in various mediums and sometimes comics of Batman that are still good. But I agree that if you got to churn it out monthly and you don't have a good editorial vision for it, you know, it can be a problem. I really liked there was that Gotham Knights miniseries back in the day, and the thing I liked about that is Batman was a character in it, and he was overshadowed a lot of it, but it wasn't really about him.
Yeah,
you know?
I was actually just thinking about that the other day, because I've John Ostrander wrote it, both 1 and 2, but it was about the people of Gotham. Lived in a world where Batman was a reality, and like one of the main characters, it was actually kind of funny, Tonic, because you bring it up, the hanger-on guy. There's a guy who's kind of like that in Gotham Knights. They're a pair that work together, and she kind of digs him, and he would but doesn't dig her. So it's kind of the opposite of that. But she doesn't understand, and so she's kind of a slut and has her whole life and doesn't understand why this other guy who she's drawn to is not throwing himself at her like all of the Johns. Like,
oh boy.
The other people in her, like the anyway, and it turns out that the dude likes her but won't let himself like her, and doesn't want to go down that road because his wife was killed by the Joker in one of his things, and so he's hung up. He's so hung up on the past, on his trauma, on his lost love, that he can't move past it. And every day in Gotham City, he's reminded that, he lives in a world where people like the Joker exist. And so he will never get over his trauma.
See, admittedly, I'm a little bit like, I love Legends of the Dark Knight, the first, 100 issues or something. They had Going Sane and all these things, but they weren't connected to anything. They were just the stories. And for like DC wise, I read Power Girl, Amanda Connor, and Jimmy Palmiotti, and I loved it. And then like X-Men, I think the only run, it's sacrilegious to most people, but for me, I never read X-Men, so I don't know. But the new X-Men, Grant Morrison, I love the hell out of it, but that's inherently how I am. I like a writer who comes in bold and then nukes his own story on his way out, right? So like the new X-Men, he retconned his own story and said, all right, you guys do whatever you want. You're not messing within my sandbox. And Grant Morrison does that a lot.
Yes.
But like that Power Girl run, it wasn't really connected to anything. You could read that and not know anything about DC. It don't matter.
Yeah.
And so I'm drawn to those. So my opinions of monthly comics are terrible because even when I was younger, I was reading storylines, and once those ended, I lost interest. Once they had that payoff, like Nightfall. When I moved to underground and indie comics and stuff, and it was because indie comics guys were lucky to get 10 issues, so you'd read that little 10-issue run, and then you'd move on to the next comic.
And I think that comes down to the old theory was editorial direction, right? Because if you go back into the 70s, well, even in the 60s somewhat, but in the 70s when they started kind of making comics for an older market again, one of the things they had is that you'd have writers that would have a section, and there'd be continuity in the overall story, but that was the editor's job.
Right.
The writers said, okay, Steve Epting, you're going to have 6 months or 9 issues of Batman. Go ahead and write your story, beginning, middle, and end, and then here's where you start with. Don't mess up where you start, because this is where the last guy left off, and leave it with X for the next guy. And then that would be, so there would be continuity. And if you bought continually, there'd be a payoff. But if you just bought the Epting stories, you're good. You're not going to be sad because that story wraps up and there's a couple little breadcrumbs for the next guy, and you might be picking up a few breadcrumbs at the beginning, but that's okay. It just tells you it's part of a universe. It's like reading a Sherlock Holmes story where he refers to that other thing that happened.
Yeah.
And I think that, but that was, and so it was a lot of times it was written that way before, and then I think it's probably Claremont coming on to X-Men and Wolfman coming on to Teen Titans, where all of a sudden those guys were like, if you didn't read 9 years of Teen Titans, you're not really getting the story.
And see, that's what I got, because I never did superhero comics. Everybody acts like I'm a superhero writer. It's like, it's just because the only comic I did was superhero, but I never did that before. But I tried to get back into DC, and I think it's because I'd had enough of depressing comics, because I read everything indie was very depressing and kind of dark stuff. So
that's a depressing concept in itself.
Yeah, it
Why
is.
Everything indie depressing?
Well, back then it was. Now it's kind of very similar to 90s Image. But back then it was, pretty dark stuff. And so I was like, I kind of want to just have fun and superheroes. I tried to catch up and I couldn't. And then when I did, the continuities didn't fit. Nothing matched. And it frustrated me. And then I was like, what if an indie guy launched a shared universe, And that's where this whole idea come with. And I was like, I'm bound to be able to write every character. And because, what if one, because, Frank Miller's kind of done it to where he launched his own DC universe in a way, and all the characters are, he controls the whole narrative. And so that's my goal. I've only got 2 issues out, well, 3 kind of. But yeah, it was inspired by that frustration and it's inherent to DC and Marvel. It's not their fault. They got hundreds of writers, editors. They got 15 people making one freaking comic that nobody's going to buy anyways. And it baffles me. I'm like, you guys could do this simpler. It's a freaking comic book. It's that hard. But yeah, that shared universe idea. And so, as much as I complain about mainstream publishing, in the end, I was like, yeah, but if I ain't doing something about it, I can't complain DC and Marvel not doing it if I'm not fixing it my dang self. And so,
and I think that's one thing that I think, I think you're an excellent example of this, Tonic, because it's not just enough. We were talking about this in relationship to the culture war earlier. And I said, the way you fight a culture war is by first speaking truth and then putting truth to action, making something, making art, right? Art is the language of a culture. So there you go. You say, here's the problems I have. And oh, by the way, you can buy my comic wherein I enact where I become a change I want to see in comics. Yeah, and I think that's something that is so important because it's about that grind. If you're going to be creative with a voice, it's about just making that happen. And I know, like Paula, you guys have your team's been working on stuff consistently. Jeremy, I know you are behind the scenes working on a ton of stuff. I was just talking to Doug Garrett. He said he wouldn't tell me what it was, but he said you guys are working on something. And I was like, that's cool. And I hate you.
Well, I mean, did he tell you it's done?
No, he didn't tell me anything about it other than he's like, right. I'm just going to be shipping it out. I don't know. I'm not. And I was like, well, tell me details. And he's like, no.
Yeah. The issue is that it has to do with the crowdfunding. You can only, I have this theory that you should, do a campaign and fulfill and then do another campaign. I know some people, overlap. I don't want to, at least not for a very long time. And Movieman Movieman meet Sporkman is going to come out after Sporkman goes to Japan ships. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm going to wait until after that campaign to do this other thing that I'm doing with Doug. And it's called Murder.
So is it a mystery?
It's a mystery. It's horror.
Ooh.
But I'm not. It's light. I mean, I don't know. It is horror. I had a problem. I was trying to write the story, and I couldn't. And then I realized I was trying to write the wrong kind of story, because I was trying to write a hero story, and that's not what it was.
Yeah.
And so finally, I was like, wait, it's horror. Okay. Well then, this is the only comic I've done like this, where I just sat down and wrote a treatment style of this is what happens in this comic, and here are some high points of dialogue. And I shipped it off to the artist, and I said, here, turn that into a comic book.
That's pretty Marvel style.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was. It's Marvel. A lot of times you'd have a very vague plot, and then the artist would firm it up. I had a very specific plot, and very specific dialogue. Not all of it, but it's a little bit Marvel and a little bit not Marvel.
Yeah. I've actually done very similar things on a couple of projects, and some of them turned out really well, and some of them I still hate myself over. And
it happens.
No, I did that with that Gypsy and Saving the Universe. I didn't have Tony needed the script as soon as possible because I told him 10 days before the campaign was over, and he's like, "How long do I got?" I go, "You got 10 days, but it's only about 10 pages, so if you hurry." And so he goes, "I can do it." So I was writing it on the way home from work because I didn't really have a script. I just knew I wanted to use that character, and I pretty much think I knew what I wanted. Well, I just wrote a paragraph that roughly laid out. Now, it's only a 10-page comic, so it's not like, but I had no dialogue, only internal narrative, like narration. So I write stories, usually like the character's narration in their head. And sometimes I don't use it, but it kind of gives me the idea. Anyways, I didn't have time to do anything else because I was working on other stuff. So I sent him this paragraph, and I said, "Can you make a comic book of this?" And he goes, "No problem." And yeah, I should have put written by Tonic Mole and Tony Sizzle, because almost all of that he came up with, like where she stops the car and then the car hits the kid, and she was not so malevolent in my script. There's the guy at the very end that she beats up and stuff, but yeah, she doesn't like orchestrate where this kid gets ran over by a car. That was Tony Sizzle. And so he come up with something, along the same lines, but a lot different. And that was, I wasn't married to my script, so it was a very cool idea. And so it was really fun to let go and just let somebody, you go, okay, it's this character, because I only need to introduce her. It wasn't like, I didn't care how she was introduced. I just needed that character because she plays into things later. And so, Tony Sizzle really ran with that in his own. You can give him like 2 words and he'll make a comic book out of it.
Yes, this is true. Not to put too much out there, but he and I are working on a little thing that we'll hopefully have out in the next couple months. So
that's gonna sizzle. I think so.
It's pretty fun.
Is that his actual name, or is that like a street name?
I think it's his name.
Like he was born Tony Sizzle.
I hope so.
Like Anthony Sizzle or whatever.
I have no idea. I do hope so.
I mean, hey, maybe. So when I'm writing an article, or sorry, not an article, I write lots of articles, but that's when I'm writing a comic book, and then I hand it off to an artist, and I get something back that I didn't expect. I ask a couple of questions. The first question is, well, is this a problem? And then the second is, does this make it better? And so I was working with Sean Langley. I'm working with him on this project called AUMF. And at one point, there's this guy. I scripted it so this guy kicks in the door, and there's 2 people on the other side of the door, and then he faces off versus these guys and fights them, and he draws it, and there's 3 people in there, right? And I said, I thought my script said 2. And he checked. He goes, "Oh yeah, it does." He goes, "Well, what if the door just kills one of them?"
Okay.
Sure, yeah, why not? That works.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with my artist, Leah. I have the scene where one of my main characters is in a dungeon and he's chained to a table, and it's a round room. And then she drew it with a round stone table that he was on. I'm like, wow, I did not say a round table, but that looks really cool. Can we keep that?
Yeah.
Now, on the opposite, I have written a very detailed script, ridiculously detailed. It was panel by panel breakdown, page, and all this stuff that was almost completely ignored. And missing frames, dialogue different, tone totally different. And I even, I wrote it a little bit like a screenplay. So also the tone that, the lightning struck and the rain and all that, and all of it was gone. It was cartoony and totally different than I had imagined. And that's pretty, it's weird. It's because it depends on the artist. Like Tony Sizzle, if I give him something and he changes it, it's going to be magic, right?
Yes.
He's really good. Like Sober, we did Sober. Now he stuck pretty close to that script. That was pretty on. But all the little details he added, there's like this, I had it to where it's wide frames, 3, I think, stacked, and the lady's just doing something. She's singing to herself, and then her husband yells at her on the second one, and then the third one, she just looks down or something like that. Well, he made the cat running through the background in the 3, like it starts here, it's jumping in the middle, and then all those little details that he adds that, bring the whole thing a little bit more to life and makes it more complex.
It sounds very much like he's trying to make it more interesting for himself as he's drawing it.
He's probably bored.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, I mean, it's not bad to create challenges for yourself.
It just means your script was bad, Tonic. That's all.
That's right. He's like, I gotta spice this booger up. But no, there's the zombie husband kicks he's just supposed to be coming towards her. Well, he put a table there, and he's kicking the table, and there's marriage photos. So really what he's like, Sizzle as the artist, he taps into what my intent is, and then amplifies it more. Yeah. And that's the artist you want, that you don't have to tell them every detail. They do it on their own in the direction you intended. So Sizzle keeps going. Hopefully. Whereas I've had both happen. I've had artists that do exactly what was on paper, which is good. Then you have them that do what you did on paper, but expand it, which is even better. But I've also had that completely ignore your script and just kind of go willy-nilly with it, which often leads to disaster because you have specific intents. You know what's going to happen next, especially when you're doing shorts and series and stuff like that. You're like, yeah, well, this is a huge freaking problem because in the next issue I got this happening and that. I had
a thing happen like that with the project I was working on years and years ago. I had an artist and I really loved her style, and she got a lot of evocative nature out of the characters, just like I wanted. But most of the action in the story happened in one house, right? And so I went through and I designed the structure of this house because it mattered for the final act, right? Because of where the different players were coming in and out of it, and it was all staged. And then about halfway through the thing, I was getting pages from her, and the layouts didn't match the house, and the final act wasn't going to make sense because the geography was wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, I included a blueprint of this house for a reason.
Yeah, it's a problem.
But at the same time, it was just like, she's also working for the paper, so I can't. Can I rewrite the script in a way that makes the third act make more sense with the way the house is drawn today?
Yeah.
But then she also flaked off a third of the way into the project, so I didn't. You didn't get to that, but the problem resolved itself, and the story's never been touched. Hasn't been touched in 15 years. So
there's one comic that I have done that there were some minor artistic problems that they weren't huge, and in this case, I was working with both an artist and a colorist, but the colorist was actually a very talented artist himself. And so rather than going back to the artist, I just had the colorist fix it. Problem solved.
Yeah, I actually did that with the webcomic, that story that we're on right now. I had the artist I had working on it is Rolf, one of our regular guys, and he started having some health problems in the middle of the project of this webcomic, and it's like a 38-page story. And he started having some health problems And then the pages I was getting back from, we decided to do it Marvel style. And so I had the page outline. Well, not quite Marvel style. I had it done I had it broke down page by page. So this is the action that happens on this page, and these are the characters involved. And this is the action that happens on this page, and these are the characters that are involved. And as I'm going along with it, I'm realizing, okay, the characters aren't all the right characters in place. There's a big cast, like 27 characters. It's a kind of a crossover story.
Why would you do that?
But not all at one page. There'd be throughout the thing. Well, because it's as of the story. If you were reading my webcomic, you'd know. I'm kidding. Nobody should have to read my webcomic. Anyway, but the thing is and Rolf was started having some health problems because he's a retired gentleman. And he just was doing it for fun because he's always wanted to make comics. And so we're having these things, and I'm like, and then I realized that also I was giving short shrift to certain characters through the story, and I needed to add some stuff to move it along. Well, my son Taliesin is quite a talented artist and was looking for something to do, so he worked fill-ins. And so I took Rolf's stuff and I scanned it in and broke it apart and separated it by page and did layouts, and Tolly's been filling in the gaps in there, and it's turning out awesome.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, the reason that I said the 27 character thing is that in Movie Men, right, there's 5 main characters, maybe 6, and that was almost too much.
Yeah. Well, in this one, I probably have 5 or maybe 6 characters that have active arcs, and everybody else is colorful scenery.
Okay.
So we've got because what it is that this premise in the story, I'll get into this here, is so it's Forces of Good and Evil is about teenage superheroes in superhero high school and villains in supervillain high school.
Okay.
And this is a hero story where 5 of the main characters from our main school are going to a Renaissance fair. The story is called Panic at the Ren Fair, where they are meeting with teams from other superhero schools to compete for extra credit. So I've got 4 different schools and their different characters. And so only a handful of them end up being important to the overall story, but all of them are scenery to play out with these different powers because it's part of our big universe.
Okay,
so,
well, that's fine.
Yeah. So they don't all have to, I don't have to, Buckskin Boone was one of my routine guys. He's in it a lot, but he doesn't really matter. He's just there for fun. So,
well, because his name is Buckskin Boone. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah, Buckskin's great. He's the homage to everything I love and hate from being from the high plains. So
okay.
he's a real Pecos Bill style redneck. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I have to draw what I write, so I don't do all that mess. I ain't gonna put in 6 characters. Gotta draw the bastards. But, which is part of.
I'm sorry. Have you seen the cartoon where you have this, like a comic book, panel at a comic book show, right? And there's a writer, and he's saying, oh, one of the great things that about comics is that we can do anything, right? For instance, I could say there's a crowd of thousands of people in my I just turn it over to my artist, and then then all of a sudden the guy next to him, who is his artist, goes, "You bastard!"
Actually, one of our regular guests on the show are the writer and artist team for the webcomic Super Schooled, which is similar theme to Forces, but this different universe stuff.
Yeah.
But they always give each other grief because the Twitless, the writer, is just like, and I just make Cartoonicus do whatever I want. And Cartoonicus is just like, it's true.
My comics all take place at night on abandoned streets.
That's fitting for a superhero comic too, though. So
it totally works.
Yeah. So one of the things I do want to get back to, a couple things from the chat. They got mentioned way again. Critical Blast.
I'm famous, apparently, according to
you are indeed. which I do want to get back to that actually for a second too. But Critical Blast was talking about that the new 52 was problematic because they did not commit to the bit. They kept chunks of history, and so you didn't really get to experience anything new, which you had talked about. And that Rebirth was a similar problem, because the one thing they kept consistent with Rebirth was that it was supposed to be hopeful, and it was supposed to be a DC universe made for fun. But then they let Tom King and Dan DiDio turn it into Doomsville again.
Yeah. It lasted for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, it was 10 months, but yeah, right.
Okay. But it took 10 seconds to read those 10 issues because they're like 15 pages long and the rest is ads.
Yeah, that may be true. But it was the very moment that Jeff Johns went to DC movies. That
right.
It was over. And like, I'm not a fan of everything Johns had done, but in architecting the Rebirth, he did a really good job. He did as good a job in it as he did with his early Flash stuff, and as good a job as he did in ruining the Flash just after that. So, because that was him bringing Barry back. Barry should have stayed dead. Okay.
Wait, you said you think Barry should have stayed buried?
Oh yes, absolutely. He wasn't ever buried. He was energy, and that was perfect.
Oh, well, it'd be funnier if he was buried.
Yeah, that would have been. Your jokes are good. Also,
I want to do a comic that's just called Dad Jokes. I'll write it at some point, but I need to find, like a good narrative hook, and
I think I have an idea for that. It was Mike Miller had tried doing his I can't remember what it was called, Bless This Mess.
Yeah.
And it was just his price point was too high.
I think it was called like Calvin and Snobs or something.
Yeah. But it was that in that style. But the point though is that if you had like a collaborative issue of just like dad creators doing strips, that could be a really could be a fun thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think all of us who are dads probably have moments where we've just been like, I can't believe I just had to tell my child this.
Yeah. Well, the one idea I had that it may or may not be a good idea is, how the superheroes are always like quipping when they fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially Spider-Man, he's famous for it. Like, what if the quips were dad jokes?
Well, here's my hot take on that. Spider-Man's are, except for the intent of the writer was to be witty. They're just not. Because when I read Kevin Smith's Spider-Man, Spider-Man Black Cat or something like that.
Yeah.
Spider-Man was actually funny, and it stood out big time that it wasn't just puns or kind of dad joke type stuff, that it was really funny. And I was like, I never noticed that Spider-Man isn't inherently funny. Like, it's always like wonk wonk. But I knew that was what the writer meant, was like, okay, now just imagine if this was all funny. So when I actually read it funny, I was like, man, Spider-Man worked really good when a comedian, like someone with comedy in them to some degree, writes that deal, writes that out. But I would like Batman telling dad jokes, which, I mean, that's kind of 66 Batman, in a way. But the golden
sometimes it's just hard to get rid of a bomb.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and really that was, the whole snappy retorts in the Silver Age were just all about that anyway. Yeah. And you're just like, you think justice feels good? Pow!
Yeah.
What?
Okay, I got to get out of here, guys.
Oh yeah, okay.
I ran out of time.
Go save the world.
Yeah.
Go save the world.
There you go. So for those guys, while Tonic takes off, the link in the description below is to the Indiegogo. I don't know why I picked that one over the Kickstarter, but I did. If you dislike Indiegogo and you want to back Tonic on Kickstarter, feel free to find him on Twitter at the Tonic Mole, and you can go ahead and find a link in his pinned tweet.
I spam it all day long. Thanks guys for having me and talking to me. I'll see you later.
We'll talk to you
man.
later, man. So now it's just the three of us, and we can get back to the topic in the heading. Since I have to apologize. I've been really bad today about keeping on topic because we just went off, man. It was so much fun.
It happens. Paula, you've had now 2 successful campaigns. What was the most successful thing for you in promoting?
Well, okay. So for my first campaign, I was terrified and I didn't want to promote. So
Okay.
for my second campaign, I did.
Okay.
Again. Oh, no, I started reaching out and talking to more people, and after getting immersed in comics Twitter and nearly drowning and getting out of that mess, I was able to look at it objectively and see, oh, these are good, consistent people. These are the tells. And these are the people who I don't want to owe any favors to.
Okay.
And, eventually I sounded out a lot of people, and there's a few more. It's an ongoing process. But I think when you're looking for people to go on a show with or to collaborate with promoting, you just have to know who you're dealing with and get a good feeling for them.
Okay.
Try to be a decent judge of character.
So do you think that it's more important?
It's a crapshoot though, because you ended up on with us. So
That's true. That's true.
But I like you guys.
Well, thank you. And one of the things that's also an interesting part of that experiment, I guess you'd say, do you think it's more important to be vulnerable to fellow creators, platform providers, that kind of thing, or with the audience? Because I think that sometimes we get caught up in our circles of creators at the sake of neglecting the audience because they're not necessarily the same.
That is so. One of the reasons why I did my campaigns for Soulbound on Kickstarter is because they do seem to be facing out towards the audience more. They're reaching out to people who are interested in comics. There are people who search Kickstarter for comics, and they don't follow any of the drama or the who's who or any of the other stuff.
yeah.
While on Indiegogo, I have a campaign up for Indigen XYZ on Indiegogo, and I've got $1.
I didn't even know about that campaign.
Yeah, see, Kickstarter has an interesting thing where everybody who you're following on Kickstarter, you get an email every time they back something. And
Okay.
I don't even know if Indiegogo does that because I've never noticed.
Yeah,
No.
I don't think they do.
And, Kickstarters, they've been thinking about this more, apparently. And they try and reach out and they try and get more people, or they try and get the people they have to overlap more. They're making more of an effort. Indiegogo is more for business startup than a project startup.
Okay.
So they kind of, it seems to me that they expect you to bring your own audience there.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have a lot more traffic, street traffic on Kickstarter. But with Indiegogo, if you could bring your own audience, you have more freedom to do things with that. So yeah, Kickstarter is greater than Indiegogo. It's funny because technically I like Indiegogo better. Just the product in terms of just the ease of ordering, and just there's a lot of things that I like about Indiegogo better than Kickstarter. But it just depends on do you want to or have the ability to get people to go to Indiegogo to back your product. The other thing is that whenever you're dealing with Indiegogo, there's a crowd Comicsgate that you have to deal with. you don't have to be Comicsgate, but it's just a thing that is you have to deal with if you're doing an Indiegogo project that you, for the most part, don't have to on Kickstarter. So, and that's a call that you make as a creator. Yeah, so you're going to say something?
No, I was going to say that I like one of the things that, like, as a consumer, I prefer to shop on Indiegogo because I was talking about this in the first hour. I like having my money taken out right away.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'd rather do that. But I can't deny that, like, I think Kickstarter is a better marketplace.
It's it's been around longer, right? It's built something up, and it's got a huge lead on Indiegogo. Yep. And Indiegogo is catching up, but and in fact, like, if you look at I don't know the numbers on Indiegogo, and recently, but Kickstarter, in this downturn, it took a huge hit in terms of, it was like 35% less backing of comic book projects on Kickstarter, according to people who've crunched the numbers. Now, that doesn't mean you can't fund things, but it's a harder fundraising environment now. Things that would have gotten funded are, just barely gotten funded, aren't getting funded. Things that would have ramped it up are, barely or just a little more than barely getting funded in many cases.
Unless you're Tim Lim.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, Tim Lim
Kickstarter did so well, but
sure, he's not new to this. He's been at this, and he has an audience, and he's got, I guarantee he's got email lists that he uses. He's got, okay. He says 35 decrease in all projects, not just comics. Okay, Tim, you're in the chat. Am I wrong that you have an email list that you're using? Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you do. You have one or more email lists that you're using to help promote these comics, and you've built that up over campaigns.
Yeah,
but
I think the fact
if I've got that wrong.
I think one of the things and this actually comes back to our main topic, is that one of the things that Mark and Tim have done is that because they keep producing and they keep delivering,
yeah,
first on time and then early and then better products, and they keep bump. Yeah. And so there's so much brand confidence that they bring to the table. And I tell you, it makes me a little jealous because I've been at the indie comic game much longer, and I'm so much worse at it. I mean, those guys are just A game. They know what they're about. They've got such quality product.
They do a very good job. They're very inventive. We could spend a whole, an hour talking about all the things they do right.
They just it's great.
So, no email list. We start from scratch every time. Okay, I'm wrong. It happened.
Except he continues to be Tim Lim.
Yeah.
That's not.
You're Tim Lim every time. So somebody mentioned TwitterCon. So can we talk about that for a minute here?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So my pitch for TwitterCon is very simple. The conventions aren't happening pretty much at all this year. Comic shops aren't getting new comics. Fewer of them are going to open. DC and Marvel have done pencils down, and a lot of other companies have too. Like the whole industry, just comics is in a bad place right now. Mm-hmm. And so what I said is, let's come up with a sort of a thing that everyone can use to promote their, comics, art, comic book related art, YouTube shows, whatever. I don't care. If it's related to comics, use hashtag TwitterCon, and just as a way of saying, I care, I care about comics, and here is a comic that I've done that I think that your art or whatever that the people who really care about comics should take a look at. And I'm the one who's used it more than anybody else, but quite a few other people have used it to advertise all kinds of different comics or comic related products. And I just think that people, and I just make the point over and over again, this is a neutral hashtag. There's no movement associated with this. It's just, do you want to promote comics? If so, this is about the simplest way I can think of to organize for people on Twitter, for people to just be able to, hey, I want to search hashtag TwitterCon. I'm going to find a lot of good comic book content that runs the gamut. And so that was an idea that I had, and I've been pushing it as hard as I can, and some other people have adopted it, and hopefully it will pick up momentum here.
And I think it's one interesting thing to have the kind of the two of you guys on, because I don't know how familiar we were talking about this before you got here with Paula's Indigen XYZ site, but it's designed to be an online convention.
Yeah,
right. So
I'm very in favor of this, and I've retweeted it several times. I've retweeted with the TwitterCon hashtag several times.
Yeah, and I think that's it's kind of a partnership of ideas.
Yeah,
because the whole point of it is another place for people to go to look for content. Yeah. So if you're a Twitterista or whatever you call those of us,
Twitterati, I don't know,
Twitterati, just a twit. Hi, my name's Reese, and I'm a twit.
Yeah, I'm there.
I'm so embarrassed now. But with that, the TwitterCon idea is not something that I have used, but something that I think is not a bad thing. I know back in the day, many of us hoped that the whole Comicsgate idea would be just one that would give more of these more fans and indie creators just an excuse to meet each other, because so many of us felt like that the old system just kept out new ideas. And so, like, I know I got into making indie comics because I got sick of collecting rejection letters from Marvel and DC. Okay. I said, you know what? I know my ideas are better than what you're doing. I'm just going to make my comics. Okay. Even if I'm the one drawing them and they look bad, my stories are better.
I just decided, look, if they want to come to me, great, we'll talk. I've got some ideas. But short of that. And
it was one of those things back in 2005 was with me and Chris sat down, and Chris Lott sat down and said, that's it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it ourselves, and we're not going to let the structures hold us back from it. And if we succeed, we succeed, and if we fail, well, at least we tried. And we're still trying all these many years later. But I think that
and I applaud and support your efforts.
Yeah. And so that was one of the things that. Sorry, I got a Fly Fox in the chat. Crack me up. But I think that's one of the things that because you've intentionally said TwitterCon it's about a TwitterCon, just like you go to a con. Everybody gets to go as long as you put your cash in the barrel head, and there's no cash here, but still, it's not about agenda, it's about platform, and about all that kind of thing. And I think that's an important thing. And I think that Paula, you're doing a similar kind of thing. I get the feeling from is just wanting to have a place where people can point to their thing.
Yeah. So there's not that much of a platform that indie creators can use, and trying to get indie creators to work together is like herding cats. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, y'all all crazy. I'm crazy too. It's okay.
Willing to acknowledge this.
We'll just accept this as a truth, and I am going to have, for my personal project, probably for the rest of my life, is I'm going to compile all us so that anyone who wants to can find us. And, I have my booth on there too. And I have the link to the Indiegogo on the Indigen site too, in case anyone would like to chip in towards operating expenses. But I think I have this thing structured where it's not going to be terribly expensive to run. It's a little bit bare. It's not all that fancy, but the key thing that I want is the search. And
Well, and see, I think that's part of the strength in the design, if you won't mind me interrupting you for a second, is that what you have is you have a hub that just points out.
Yeah.
It says, okay, if you want to find more out about these projects, you click on their link and you let them talk to you about their stuff. If what they've presented is interesting, go for it.
Yes,
and it doesn't have, like, I don't know if you remember the Comic Space platform that existed for a while and then went belly up, and it was basically like a MySpace for comic creators. And it was a cool platform, but it was basically a social media. So there was everybody was sharing links and stuff, and it was all sorts of talking and all kinds of the networking aspects, and it really bogged down the site, so that if you were looking for a product, you would get roped into people's conversations about stuff rather than just saying, this is about looking
inward in the in group, and it's not facing out to the audience.
Exactly. And it was the good thing about. I was saying the good thing about that platform, sorry, was that it was good for networking with other creatives. But the bad thing is you really didn't ever meet customers.
Right. That's how they all go. That's how all the Facebook groups are that are promotion groups. Like, I tried to run one of those, and you know what? There's a ton of people who are like, yay, let me post my link to my comic. And then they come back to post their link to the next comic. And then, it's 6 months to a year later, and they come back to post the link to it's just a place to dump links. And it doesn't help customers because there's no way to find what you want.
Yeah. I mean, you can do some good with Facebook promotion, but it's ephemeral. Like you do it. It matters right now for like when I'm pushing a campaign or something. But in terms of organization to come back later, that's not that's not what I'm going for. So I'm really glad that you're putting this together, and I need to write to Wicked actually and tell them, guys, we need to get in this.
Yeah. The only reason that I haven't
small presses, Wicked can have their own booth, and each individual comic or creative team can also have a booth there too. I mean, it'll help sort out the search terms.
Well, and I would like Ideal to have a booth, but the problem is our website is, I'm not happy with it enough that I want people to actually go to idealcomics.net because there's not enough content to be interesting right now. It's just a landing pad right now, and and so no, I don't want that on there because I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, it took me a little while to get my own booth on there, but the thing is, you'll notice if you click through a few of these, it's not all just the creator's own site. It's also, let's see. TJ down here. I'm wanting to scroll on your screen. That does not happen. Okay, so TJ right here. That link goes to his Amazon author page. So it doesn't have to be your personal website. It has to be where people can find you and buy your stuff. And if the best place for people to do that is on your Amazon page, that's great. And if the best place for people to do that is your Redbubble store, then okay, that'll work too. I don't know if you can put comics on there, but if you have like an Etsy or something,
right?
As long as what you're advertising in your blurb on your booth, that it pops up when you scroll over it.
That's so neat. This it's bare bones, but it's super functional.
Yeah, I was so excited. So a friend of a friend on Twitter put this together for me. I'm not even entirely sure of his last name. I'm gonna have to go back and give him references and stuff because he's wanting to get into developing websites, and he's like, well, this is great. I'll give you a discount. We'll see if we want to do this. If I want to do this, as a full-time thing. And he was awesome to work with. It's like I wrote up like a almost like a story, like a narrative of what I wanted people to experience going into the site. And he just took that and he just made it so pretty and it's so functional. And he's like, well, I could make it fancier. And I'm like, no, 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 keep it clean. It's so pretty. I love it so much.
I think it's got the flexibility. I mean, I really like it. I tell you, we have a part of the thing with our website is like we had a fellow come on to help us with a redesign and did good work with the layout of it. But the content was just not where I want as far as trying to get stuff on it. And some of the features that I want to add to it, I just haven't gotten figured out. And I'm not, for some reason, like I just haven't been able to make heads or tails of tweaking the stuff that I want on it.
Yeah,
and
I hate WordPress with that.
And I'm just it's not right. It's just not right.
You
so
had
that's
a
part of
vision.
And then the fellow who he had contracted on it, he got busy with other stuff, and that's okay. I mean, it's not a bad thing. He did excellent work with what he did. I just want more, and he's not available right now.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
So
I got to finish paying my developer, but I'm scraping stuff together right now. I'm running this thing on a shoestring. I think I've got it where if I can extend the hosting plan, then it shouldn't need much to just continue.
How much are you trying to raise through Indiegogo right now? How much are you trying to raise through Indiegogo right now?
500.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put it at the minimum, and I really haven't had any time to promote it until like today. So yeah, it hasn't gained much traction yet.
Okay.
But
no, I think we're gonna have to do another promotional show.
I think so. I think we really ought to. This is the kind of project that I think is an important one. And so here's part of my thing with it is like, and why maybe it was a mistake to try to get into the indie comics world, but I've got the bug and now I can't get out. But I'm a story guy, right? And I want to take time to focus on story and art and big picture stuff, because that's what my passion is. And all of the marketing and networking and all that kind of stuff is something that I don't really care about. But I know how important it is, but it's not what I'm good at. And so,
well, I mean, that you say that you're not good at it, and sure, yeah, right now you're not good at it, but that doesn't mean you can't get good at it.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things is like in terms of networking, I mean, that is kind of an interesting thing too, because like I really like this little show of mine has become something that I didn't expect. It's not huge, but it's small. And it's a lot of fun. And I enjoy finding other creative people that I can have these conversations with. That doesn't necessarily move comics. But I think that it's an important aspect of it all. And if I have the chance to even start highlighting other creatives that I believe in, or their projects and ideas, then I think that's worth something.
Yeah. Let's do. My wife's gonna be back in a minute here with the daughter and stuff, so I gotta go. But
yeah.
Let's. I don't know. Pick a. Well, not next week, obviously, but several weeks out. Let's do a promotional show, and I'll come in the first segment, and we'll sort of break down what are the difficulties in promoting.
Yeah.
And how are some of the, how can you overcome some of it? What. And one of the biggest lessons is that people think, oh, I can't do it all, therefore I shouldn't do anything. But no, that is such a mistake.
Well, and I think that's one of the issues when it comes to the networking portion of it, is finding the street team, finding the other creatives and the fans that really buy into the vision. And that's something that maybe I'll try to see if Brian Ball would be interested in coming on.
He's found
he's found a little golden egg for his brand, And I know he loves to share ideas with people. He might be interested in that
Yep.
kind of a conversation.
That would
As
definitely
long as Rag 7 is done, because he told me he will not come on until it's done. So, and I know we're nearing there. But we'll see. It'll probably need to be June, I think. But
yeah, we should. Anyways, I gotta go, but we'll do this again, and we'll break it down. So
yeah. Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming on. It's been a fun and varied conversation, and thank you for coming. I'm going to actually call the show because it is 9 o'clock.
Okay,
and it's a good time. So I do want to say check out Movie Men. It was super fun, and I know there's more in the can that is just waiting.
It's coming. Of course,
Jeremy's you've got like 7 projects deep you're on right now, something like that.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Maybe. It's all very cagey, very suspicious.
Your numbers are so low. Anyways, we'll talk.
And Paula, thank you so much for coming on. I know we spent a lot of the night talking over you.
That's all right. It's really fascinating because I'm not really caught up on, the mainstream comics. I mean, all I ever wanted to do was make my own stories.
Mm.
And it's really interesting to see where the mainstream has had its missteps, but they've also had their big hits.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's really interesting to learn about how other people in other circumstances do things, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that is one of those things that is such a, and I think you can learn a lot from the industry in terms of storytelling and everything.
Well, at the very least, you can see where they bombed and not do that.
Oh yeah, exactly, and all that. But I think it's also one of those things that as a fan, I get to dig on that stuff, but as a creator, I get to break it down and see what I did like, what I didn't like, and how I can apply those things to my own stories in different ways. And I think that's important. But I also, I think it's, I'm really inspired. Just the breadth of vision every time I talk to you about something, whether it's about your stories and the creativity behind them, or about the Indigen thing, just that you've got a map in your mind about how you think this is a good fix. And I think that's a wonderful thing to throw in there. So thank you for coming on and sharing that. And I definitely intend to make it a point to spread a little more love toward the project. And I didn't realize you had a Indiegogo for funding it either. So.
Oh goodness, yeah. I don't really like Indiegogo's layout. I don't know what y'all find so appealing about it. But yeah, it was a little aggravating to set up, and then I got busy with stuff at home, like all my in real life projects, and I just never really got to do anything with it. Fortunately, I set the end date for it like way out in the future.
Oh yeah, you have 47 days left, and
down.
It might be. I don't want to get too far out there, but I wonder if there's maybe some way some of us other indie guys could pitch in some reward tiers to spread a little love toward that.
I would appreciate some help.
I wonder
don't
about
want
that.
to do so much shipping out for a thing that is entirely online.
Yeah, well, I mean that may be something that like maybe even digital rewards or something. I mean, just something to give people a little a reason to see the benefit of something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it could even be like coupons to the people who have booths there or something like that.
Oh, that would be excellent. Yeah. What I really want to do is get a whole lot more booths in, and then once I have a nice big variety, like it turns into a really big con, then I want to start bringing in more of the regular audience, start talking it up, start bringing in more and more traffic. But the big draw was going to be the variety and being able to search through the variety without everyone getting lost.
Yeah, I think so. And the search tool you guys have, I mean, I know you only have like, a half dozen booths set up, but the search tool you have there is is fun. It's a fun. I mean, fun is it's function. It's so functional and easy that it's simple to use, and I think that's going to be something that it's not a chore. I think it's something that's going to that really is going to set it aside from every other platform that I've seen that tries to do something similar. You know.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the search is the big thing about it. Like I lay awake so many nights thinking, okay, it has to have the media because some people really like movies, they really like cartoons. I really like cartoons. Some people really want their comics, but there may be crossover. So we'll want several different media.
Well, yeah, I mean, just look at how Doug Tenaple's, doing the thing with the Earthworm Jim coloring book.
Oh yeah,
that $800,000 from his Indiegogo was not from video game. I mean, was not from comic book readers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not all of it.
Yeah, so there's so much opportunity for crossover in media, and then there's so much crossover opportunity in genre. And then, with the maturity ratings, sometimes I just want to search the stuff that's rated G. And, I'm not going any higher on linking to rated. I'm not linking to any stuff that's rated higher than mature. Yeah. So I'm going to keep my family-friendly con atmosphere going.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things that, like, it gives you the option to look at stuff like that. So I think that's, and you get, good quality content from people like Nasser, but it's also horror. It's not everyone's bag,
Yeah.
So
strangely, out of my half dozen here, I've got a lot of horror.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a definite market for something like that. So, I think it's something we can need to spread a little love toward that. So anyway, it's 13 after the hour, and I'm really going to call it. Okay. You guys in the chat, thank you for hanging out. I appreciate that. You guys, this has been a really fun show. It's been a little scatterbrained because that's how I feel today, I guess.
Paula, we all are now.
You're the last one remaining, and I really appreciate that. And I'm gonna sign off and probably go, play Fallout. And so you guys have a great one. Keep reading comics, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.